It was nearly midnight, January 20th, 1936. In the royal estate of Sandringham, King George V lay unconscious, slipping in and out of a deepening coma. And then his trusted physician entered the room. A fatal dose of morphine, followed by cocaine, not to save him, but to end him. This was not mercy killing, it was a decision, carefully timed, so the king's death would be announced in the Times and not in the less dignified evening papers. Was it compassion or monarchy at its most ruthless? This is the untold story of the night a British king was murdered. Not by fate, but by design. George V was never the crown prince of hearts. He wasn't charismatic like his cousin the Kaiser, nor adored like Queen Victoria had been. He disliked modernity, distrusted politicians, and loathed the press. But he was solid, dutiful, predictable, and in an empire that spanned nearly a quarter of the globe, that was enough. Publicly, he was the perfect constitutional monarch, a man who said little and revealed less. But privately, he was strict, even cold, especially towards his children. A career naval officer, George came to the throne almost by accident. His elder brother, Prince Albert Victor, died young, thrusting George into the role of heir, albeit reluctantly. Following the death of his father, King Edward VII, he acceded to the throne on May 6, 1910, and steered Britain through the First World War, a global flu pandemic, and the collapse of cousin empires across Europe. By the 1930s, however, time was catching up. A lifetime of smoking had left him with chronic bronchitis, and what today would likely be diagnosed as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. He could barely walk a distance without coughing and frequently retreated from public duties. George was a king, physically fading, but few could have imagined how he would be taken. Lord Dawson of Penn was more than just a physician. He was a peer of the realm, an insider in the most exclusive of circles, and one of the most influential medical men in Britain. He served not just George V, but prime ministers and aristocrats alike. His job was not only to heal, but to shield, to maintain dignity, especially for the king. In those days, doctors were bound less by law than by loyalty and tradition, and Dawson, ever the courtier, understood the power of presentation. What few knew is that Dawson kept meticulous notes, a personal journal that revealed not just medical details, but private decisions made in royal chambers. His role in history was not just as a witness, but as a participant. In the first weeks of 1936, King George's health rapidly declined. He had just turned 70, but was frail, pale, and unable to rise from bed. At Sandringham House, winter had settled in. So too had the final chapter of the king's life. King George slipped in and out of consciousness. Oxygen was administered, morphine given to ease the pain, and the royal family was summoned. Queen Mary remained calm but anxious. Prince Edward the heir waited in the wings, and outside the estate journalists gathered, notebooks ready, wires open. In London, newspaper editors prepared front pages, but the announcement, they were told, would not come until morning, and it didn't, because that night the king's fate was being sealed, not by nature, but by needle. At 11 p.m, Lord Dawson recorded that the king was unconscious. His condition had deteriorated beyond recovery. Then came the moment Dawson never announced publicly in his lifetime. He took a syringe filled with a lethal combination of morphine and cocaine and administered it intravenously into the king's bloodstream. He later wrote, "At about 11 o'clock, it was evident that the last stage might endure for many hours, unknown to the patient, but little comporting with the dignity and serenity which he so richly merited, and which demanded a brief final scene. Hours of waiting just for the mechanical end, when all that is really life has departed, only exhausts the onlookers and keeps them so strained that they cannot avail themselves of the solace of thought, communion, or prayer. I therefore decided to determine the end and injected 3/4 gram of morphia, and shortly afterwards 1 gram of cocaine into the distended jugular vein. And so, it was not a slip of the hand. It was planned, premeditated, carried out without the family's knowledge or consent. The king died just before midnight by the hand of the man he had trusted with his life. To understand Dawson's decision, one must understand the media culture of the day. The Times of London was the monarchy's paper of record, respectable, conservative, elite. But the evening papers? Sensationalist, populist, and often scorned by the upper class. Dawson feared that the king's death would be trivialized if broken by tabloids, so he delayed it, or rather controlled it, ensuring the news hit the morning editions with solemnity and grace. To Dawson, this was not a crime. It was image management. But to history, that remains up for debate. At dawn, the official announcement was clinical. The king had passed away peacefully, in his sleep.
Shortly after midnight, the world heard the broadcast announcement. Death has come peacefully to the king at 11:55 on Monday the 20th of January 1936. His Majesty had passed away peacefully in the home from which on Christmas Day he talked to us, his people, as friend and father.
The nation mourned. Flags lowered. Bells tolled in cathedrals across the empire. A grand funeral was held, and dignitaries from across Europe were in attendance. The image of the monarch, noble in life, dignified in death, was complete, and the truth buried with him. For 50 years, the world believed King George V died naturally, until 1986, when Lord Dawson's private diary was made public by the Royal College of Physicians. The entry detailing the injection was discovered. The medical term used, euthanasia. But this was not a hospital ward. This was a royal chamber. The palace remained silent. There were no investigations, no inquiries. After all, who would dare put a monarch's death and the royal doctor's honour on trial? So the monarchy did what it does best. It endured. In Britain, some taboos remain sacred. even in death. Today, the questions echo louder than ever. Was this an early case of euthanasia, decades before the debate entered modern medicine? Or was it medical overreach? A man deciding when a king should die for the sake of a newspaper headline. Where is the line between mercy and control, between compassion and conspiracy? And who ultimately had the right to decide? The monarchy was, and still is, an institution obsessed with image. A dying king gasping for breath in the night. Not the final portrait they wanted the world to remember. A quiet, composed passing. That they could print. King George V ruled an empire. Yet in the end, his death was orchestrated by a single man. Not a prince, not a prime minister, but a doctor. To this day, no royal has spoken of it. No apology has been issued. No admission offered. Was it mercy or monarchy at its most ruthless? In the House of Windsor, even death may be subject to protocol. And sometimes power does not die quietly. But when image becomes more important than life itself, what does that say about power, about duty, and about truth?